Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon again to all those who have tuned in this afternoon for this particular program, which actually commences a long journey of 1 year into Swatantrata Ka Amrit Mahotsav. 15th August 2021, we started 75th year of the independence. Vidnyan, Bharati and Vivekananda Education Society have brought in together today's program. To begin the proceedings, I request Manisha Oak from Vidnyan Bharati to start with the invocation. Manisha Oak.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Ishavasyamidam Sarvam Yatkincha Jagatyan Jagat Tena Tyaktena Bhunjitha Magrudah Kasya Svidhanam Vidyanch avidyanch yastadvedo bhayam sah avidyaya mrityum tirtva vidyaya mritam ashnute sarve bhavantu sukhina sarve santu niramayaha sarve bhadrani pashyantu ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you. Now may I request Sri Santosh Ji More to present the VVS Geet. Thank you.
बिन विवेक आनंद कहाँ, आनंद कहाँ, जहाँ विवेक आनंद वहाँ, आनंद वहाँ, बिन विवेक आनंद कहाँ, जहाँ विवेक आनंद वहाँ, यहाँ दोनों है विद्यमान। विवेकानंद शिक्षा संस्थान, शिक्षा का ये तीर्थ है महान, मंगलमय शिक्षा का ये तीर्थ है महान। बिन विवेक आनंद कहाँ, जहाँ विवेक आनंद वहाँ, यहाँ दोनों है विद्यमान। विवेकानंद शिक्षा संस्थान, शिक्षा का ये तीर्थ है महान, मंगलमय शिक्षा का ये तीर्थ है महान। जगमग करता पर्व ये सुहाना, भाग्य में अपने है इसे मनाना। जगमग करता पर्व ये सुहाना, भाग्य में अपने है इसे मनाना। स्वप्न जिन्होंने सजाया, तन मन जीवन लुटाया, उन हर्षु अडवाणी को ना भुलाना। कण कण में वे बसे यहाँ, कण कण में वे बसे यहाँ, उनकी लिखी ये दास्तां। कण कण में वे बसे यहाँ, उनकी लिखी ये दास्तां। सर्वाधिक उनका योगदान, विवेकानंद शिक्षा संस्थान शिक्षा का ये तीर्थ है महान, मंगलमय शिक्षा का ये तीर्थ है महान, शिक्षा का ये तीर्थ है महान। बिन विवेक आनंद कहाँ, जहाँ विवेक आनंद वहाँ, यहाँ दोनों है विद्यमान। विवेकानंद शिक्षा संस्थान शिक्षा का ये तीर्थ है महान, मंगलमय शिक्षा का ये तीर्थ है महान, मंगलमय शिक्षा का ये तीर्थ है महान। Thank you.
धन्यवाद मौर्य जी. It's my pleasure and duty to welcome all of you in this particular inaugural function of Swatantrata Ka Amrit Mahotsav, which has already begun on 15th of August 2021. And it is indeed our fortunate part that VES, Vivekananda Education Society, agreed to be part of these celebrations, and that's why we all are here. My another important duty today at this moment is to introduce the organization Vidnyan Bharati to all of you. Most of you are conversant with the work of Vidnyan Bharati, but I must go ahead and give you all the details. We at Konkan Pran are one of such prans in various parts of our country. This is a national organization which is actually a science movement. And we call ourselves as a Swadeshi science movement from the point of view of the fact we wish and we believe that the science and technology at the disposal of the nation should be used to solve, ameliorate all the problems of the society. And also we want to propagate the Swadeshi understanding in terms of science and technology amongst the masses. Apart from creating more and more scientific approach within, or cultivate scientific approach within the society, we also want people to be aware about the glorious tradition our country has had in this particular field. And we are saying that all those qualities, all those understandings which have been imbibed through the generations by our country. This is done by organizing various activities, projects, as well as lectures, expert lecture series, or some topical seminars, workshops. And whenever it is necessary, we also have some excursions done on the spot. In this manner, we have association with, in the national context I'm saying, with all major research institutions, national laboratories, and we have the, I can tell you who's who of science and technology of the country as our mentors, guides. Maybe they are vice chancellors or professors of universities, or in many sense the government secretaries and what have you. So in that sense, हमारा जो काम है वो ऐसा है कि सभी लोगों के साथ लेके ये विज्ञान का जो क्षेत्र है उसमें ऐसा बुनियादी स्वरूप का काम करें कि लोगों को अपना जो वैभवशाली धरोहर रहे हैं उसका अभिमान जागृत हो, और उसके साथ साथ आज के दिन में जो भी हमारी समस्याएं हैं उसका हम ठीक ठाक जानकारी रखें और उसके ऊपर सुझाव भी ढूंढें. सो विज्ञान भारती की कोंकण प्रांत का इसी उपलक्ष्य में आज का जो कार्यक्रम शुरू हो रहा है, पूरे साल भर का जो नियोजन होगा उसका उद्घाटन समारोह आज संपन्न हो रहा है. उसमें ये सब चीज़ें हम कर पाएँ ओनली बिकॉज इसके कारणवश कि विवेकानंद एजुकेशन ट्रस्ट, ये जो बड़ा ट्रस्ट है एजुकेशनल ट्रस्ट, वो हमारे साथ आया। उनके प्रेसिडेंट श्री अमर असरानी जी हमारे साथ हैं। मेरी उनसे गुजारिश है कि आज उनके तरफ से इस प्रोग्राम में जो बात रखी है वो अमर असरानी जी ये मेरे निवेदन के पास रखेंगे, और मैं उनका शुक्रगुजार रहूँगा विज्ञान भारती की तरफ से, हम सभी दर्शकों की तरफ से, कि आज उनके विचार हमको सुनने मिलेंगे और हमारे विचार में बहुत बढ़ोतरी होगी। अमर असरानी जी।
नमस्कार। विज्ञान भारती और विवेकानंद एजुकेशन सोसाइटी के पदाधिकारी और सभी सदस्यगण, ये विवेकानंद एजुकेशन सोसाइटी का सौभाग्य है कि आज इस स्वतंत्रता के अमृत महोत्सव में हम विज्ञान भारती के साथ यह कार्यक्रम प्रस्तुत कर रहे हैं। मैं आप सभी का स्वागत करता हूं। भारत के आज़ादी के 75 वर्ष पूर्ण होने के उपलक्ष्य में इस कार्यक्रम का आयोजन वर्ष भर के लिए किया जा रहा है। गत 15 अगस्त को लाल किले के प्राची पर हमारे माननीय प्रधानमंत्री श्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने एक नया नारा लगाया, सबका साथ, सबका विकास, सबका विश्वास और सबका प्रयास। यह प्रयास शब्द नया जोड़ा गया है। उसी के उपलक्ष्य में हमारा भी ये प्रयास है कि विज्ञान भारती के इस कार्यक्रम के उपलक्ष्य में हम उन वैज्ञानिकों के बारे में जानकारी प्राप्त करें जिन्होंने आज़ादी के इस मुहिम में अपना सहयोग दिया था और अपना योगदान दिया था। विज्ञान हमारे जीवन का एक हिस्सा है जिसको हमें गंभीरता से लेना चाहिए। विवेकानंद एजुकेशन सोसाइटी की बुनियाद हमारे श्री अशु आडवाणी जी, जो एक सोशल वर्कर, एजुकेशनिस्ट, पॉलिटिशियन और एक निष्काम योगी थे, जिन्होंने विवेकानंद एजुकेशन सोसाइटी की बुनियाद 1962 में की। और आज हमारे यहाँ पर लगभग 26 इंस्टीट्यूशंस हैं और केजी टू पीएचडी ऐसे अलग अलग कोर्सेस यहाँ पर उपलब्ध हैं। 20,000 विद्यार्थी लगभग हमारे इस संस्था में अपना अभ्यास करने का और जीवन बनाने का यहाँ पर प्रयत्न करते हैं। विज्ञान भारती के तरफ से जब श्री माधव राजवड़े जी ने हमें मौका दिया तो हमने सहर्ष वह कबूल किया, और ये हमारा सौभाग्य है कि हम संयुक्त रूप में इस कार्यक्रम को पेश कर रहे हैं। मैं आभारी हूँ प्रोफेसर जगताप जी का, जो आज इस कार्यक्रम में मुख्य वक्ता हैं, जिसको सुनने के लिए आप भी ललायत हैं, मैं भी ललायत हूँ। धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद असरानी जी, आपने बहुत ही अच्छे शब्दों में और दिल से अपनी बात रखी है। हम आपकी बात का आदर करते हैं और आपका जो आशीर्वाद हमारे ऊपर है वो उसको साल भर में और उसके बाद भी कायम रखिएगा। हम कोशिश करेंगे हम उसके तरफ हमारा जो दायित्व है वो पूरा करने की। उसके बाद में हम आगे चलते हैं कार्यक्रम को आगे बढ़ाते हुए। I will request President of Vidnyan Bharati Konkan Prant, Professor S.D. Samant sir, to introduce the chief guest in the first place, but also to introduce to all the audience that what is this Swatantrata Ka Amrut Mahotsav and what kind of activities we are going to embark upon throughout the year. And also he will request after these two things are done to release VVM brochure, Vidyarthi Vigyan Manch brochure, an examination conducted by Vidnyan Bharati at the hands of Professor B.N. Jagtap. So I proudly present President of Vidnyan Bharati Konkan Prant, Professor Srinivan Samant. Samant sir.
Namaskar everybody. Dignitaries on the virtual dais from Vidnyan Bharati and from Vivekananda Education Society and the online viewers. I, as the President of Vidnyan Bharati Konkan Prant, welcome you all for today's important function of the inauguration of the year-long celebrations of Swatantrata Ka Amrita Mahotsav. Day before yesterday, we celebrated our 75th Independence Day, and the ensuing year up to 15th of August 2022 is the 75th year of our independence. It is something unique, worth celebrating, and our country has decided to celebrate it as Swatantrata Ka Amrita Mahotsav. Our Honorable Prime Minister has initiated it on 12th of March this year, 2021, and declared that in next 75 weeks it will be celebrated through 75 different programs. Vidnyan Bharati has decided to celebrate the year in line with its mission. We have decided to focus on the contribution of our Indian scientists towards the freedom struggle, nation building, and laying the foundation of modern science in our country. So on this occasion, some thoughts come to my mind. The term Swatantrata has many meanings, and these meanings have different frames of reference. Just some time back, I read somewhere that Lokmanya Tilak has given an altogether different meaning to Swatantrata. Now he said that the independence is our Rajakiya Moksha, something totally, this has a philosophical connotation, and those stalwart, the great people, they had interpreted that in various ways because they had different vision of our country before them. The word freedom has different meaning. Freedom from somebody, freedom from something. That is understandable. But the question is freedom from what? Now here comes the importance of Swatantrata. We will rule ourselves. This says that we will rule ourselves. Now this cannot be realized unless there is a equality and other human values. Thus there is a self-restraint also. We must apply these values to all walks of life, and very important, to science also. So this point comes to my mind when we are talking about our activities of Vibha, where we are going to put science in this framework. The great scientists prior to independence showed us the path, doing good science, solving problems of society, laying the foundation of modern scientific institutions, and cultivating modern scientific thought. But when we are thinking about the current situation and planning for future, we have to pay attention to the word Swatantrata in science, So the question is, obvious question is our science associated with Swa of this country? When a common man thinks of Indian struggle for independence, hardly thinks of scientists as freedom fighters. We rarely think about their motivation to work and achieve international repute in that time. In the early decades of last century, there were many Indian scientists working with very limited resources, adverse conditions, and humiliating atmosphere. Very important point, humiliating atmosphere. But they had tremendous love and respect for our country and wanted to show to the world the talent of India. Comparatively, high quality research work came out from them. Dr. C.V. Raman, the first Nobel laureate, was from this group. He had tears in his eyes while receiving a coveted Nobel Prize, thinking that his motherland was still under the clutches of Britishers. There were many. Acharya Prafulla Chandra Ray, Jagadish Chandra Basu, Satyendranath Basu, Mahendralal Sarkar, Lala Ruchiram Sahani and Birbal Sahani, Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar, P.S. Khankoje, K.N. Dikshit, D.B. Limaye, Y.P. Subbarao, Homi Bhabha, S.B. Talpade, Jamshed Tata, Lakshman Rao Kirloskar, Khwaja Abdul Hamid, and the endless long list is there, and so on. Many names come to my mind. Some of them supported the freedom struggle overtly or covertly. Some of them carried out excellent research in science, which was recognized internationally. C.V. Raman used to say, this I have read in one scientific paper, C.V. Raman used to say at that time proudly that the facilities in his laboratory were at par with any contemporary laboratory in Europe. Can we say so now? So many the ideas come to my mind. And this is one very famous quote of C.V. Raman. My facilities in my lab, they are contemporary, equivalent to facilities in any lab in the world. This was so important at that time as the Britishers wanted to give a wrong signal to the world that Indian brain was not suitable for science. Some of them exhibited entrepreneurship in spite of no such background, no financial support, and adverse situations. They had conviction that industrialization is the key to our country's growth and prosperity. They laid the foundation of Indian industry. Companies like Bengal Chemicals and Pharmaceuticals, which was founded by P.C. Ray, Kirloskar Brothers, Ogle Glass Works, Sisipala, Alembic are examples of this. The details of how these scientists come entrepreneurs develop their scientific ideas to full-fledged industries. This will encourage and guide our young graduates. Now we hear about startups. These were the examples of successful startups before independence. Some of these scientists established Indian scientific institutions, and the motto was by Indians, for Indians. Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, Indian Association of Cultivation of Sciences, Kolkata, Agarkar Research Institute, Pune, Ranade Industrial and Economic Institution, Pune. There are few examples of such institutions. We would like to enlighten the public about these unsung heroes, our scientists, who using scientific tools and knowledge tirelessly worked for their motherland. Our activities should not be merely embracing the past glory or for entertaining masses. We are sure that their life stories will motivate our youth to achieve high goals and at the same time develop a national pride among them. We will highlight the importance of science as a tool for national growth. In the last decade or so, the term science diplomacy has come to limelight. Science diplomacy. It is the use of science in building international relationships. It reflects the soft power of a nation. Actually, this power was exhibited in pre-independence period in colonizing weaker countries and exploiting them. On this background of the current pandemic, COVID-19, the concept has gained a lot of importance. Public should be made aware of this. Science diplomacy is going to play a major role in making our country a superpower. So we wish that there will be discussions during this year with respect to all these points. We would like to organize lectures, discussions, competitions, exhibitions, and reach out to all cross sections of the society. For this, we have decided to collaborate with educational institutions, colleges, schools. We are sure today's step of our association with Vivekananda Education Society will continue and blossom. We request you all to spread this message and associate with Vidnyan Bharati and participate in this Amrit Mahotsav. With these words, I close my address. Thank you. After this, I would like to introduce our today's keynote speaker, Professor B.N. Jagtap. Professor B.N. Jagtap, after graduation, joined BRC through their training school program. He completed his PhD in physics from University of Mumbai in 1987. After that, he did postdoc research at University of Western Ontario, Canada during 1992 and 94. Then he was visiting fellow at Center for the Chemical Physics, UWO, Canada during 2000 and 2001. He was a distinguished scientist and director of chemistry group BRC, and after retirement of that, he joined IIT Mumbai. He had received many awards. Some of them are Homi Bhabha Award for Science and Technology 1999, Professor Rai Dastidar Award for Atomic and Molecular Physics, then Platinum Jubilee Award of Indian Science Congress, Jagadguru Shankaracharya Award for National Eminence. He has expertise in lasers, energy, environment, and health. He emphasizes the concept of use of science for social development, which is very, very relevant in the present context. And his concept is lab to land. Currently, he is a senior professor at Department of Physics, IIT Bombay. He is chairman of governing body of SN Bose National Center for Basic Sciences, Kolkata. He is chairman of the Research Council of National Institute of Science, Communication and Policy Studies, New Delhi. So after this brief introduction, I request Professor Jagtap to release the Vidyarthi Vigyan Manthan program brochure which we have prepared in virtual mode. Professor Jagtap. Thank you, Professor Jagtap. Now, after this, I request Professor Jagtap to start the keynote address, and the title is Remembering the Contribution of Scientists to India's Freedom Struggle. Professor Jagtap. Professor Jagtap, you unmute.
Thank you, Professor Samant, for your kind introduction. At the outset, let me greet you all, the Swatantrata Ka Amrit Mahotsav. Let me also thank Vidnyan Bharati and Vivekananda Education Society for inviting me to participate in this grand function. It's indeed a proud privilege for me. Friends, when we peruse the pages of history, we find that India's journey in modern science was inseparable from her journey to freedom. It begins with the racial discrimination and intellectual suppression. Then begins a phase where scientists assert themselves and prove to the British masters that they were as good as the best in the world. This movement spreads across India. And finally, in the third phase, it culminates into a grand dream of empowering independent India with science and technology. Today, we are going to trace this journey of modern science in India by remembering the contribution of the scientists to the freedom movement. While the great names of that era are known to you all, it's also a time to recollect the contributions of unsung heroes of science in this extraordinary journey. And that is what I'm going to do in this presentation. Let me begin with a bit of history. And the starting point for my presentation is 1835, where the East India Company had become the ruler of India, and there was no native power that posed a threat to the company. And that is where the English education started in this country. And we need to take some background of this. Now, you can read below this slide the famous statement by Charles Grant. And it says, once English knowledge was imparted to the Asiatics, their faculty of reasoning would be restored and they would rise to the scale of human being. So all that British wanted to do through education in this country was moral and mental improvement of the natives, as we were called that time. And therefore came the English Education Act of 1835, the Wood Dispatch of 1854, which led the formation of the universities like Bombay University that time was formed in 1857, and other 3 universities in the country. The primary objective of this education was to produce clerks, teachers, and munsips. And remember that this education was skillless education, and there was an extraordinary emphasis on literature and humanities. Just to give you an example, the University of Bombay started its operation in 1857. However, the degree BSc, the Bachelor in Science, started only in 1879, and that too without any laboratory practicals. The Master of Science in the University of Bombay started in 1911. And in Calcutta University, the Master of Science started in 1914. So this was the situation about the science education in this country. And this is not to say that the British did not develop any technical education in this country, but this technical education was entirely with their own interest, the imperial interest. For example, we hear that the Roorkee College of Engineering was established in 1848. That was to generate the sub-assistant engineers and overseers, the subordinate class of engineers who would materially aid European engineers. We also know the Grand Medical College started in 1845. The primary objective was to produce these medical assistants who will help the European doctors. Among all this technical education, the survey school started way back in 1794. The reason for that was very simple. This whole subcontinent, the vast subcontinent, was to be surveyed. It required surveyors and topographers, and therefore the survey schools came into picture much earlier in this country. Of course, that you can see here that all this education created an equation that if you take this education, you get a government job. And to reflect today, we also are fallen into this trap. Somehow our education system needs to impress upon the students and also give the examples of the scientists which we are going to talk about. When it comes to the survey schools, the initial engagement of Indians were in the surveys. And there are famous names. Some of them we have forgotten today. This is Radhanath Sarkar. At the age of 19, he joined the Great Trigonometric Survey of India, 1831, as a computer. Computer was a designation, somebody who calculates using the trigonometric observations in the surveys. 1852 is said to have discovered the highest peak in the Himalayas, the peak which was known to be Peak 15th. And this peak was named Mount Everest after George Everest, who was the Surveyor General of India during 1830 to 1843. So the name was not Sikdar, but it was Mount Everest. In 1851, the British government, the company government, they published a survey manual. And it was Sikdar who wrote the technical and mathematical chapters of this manual. However, his name was dropped in the third edition of the book. All these surveyors, they were termed as mountain coolies, a derogatory word. And Sikdar did not like it. He protested and he was fined rupees 200. Coming to this mountain coolies, there are many fairy tales about persons like Nain Singh Rawat and his brother Krishna Singh Rawat, Imam Baksh Bosdar. They carried out the surveys in a very difficult situation. Nain Singh Rawat is the one who mapped Tibet and also calculated the elevation using the boiling point of water. It was a great work that these people did. However, this was not recognized. Another example of that period was Chintamani Raghunatchari. He joined Madras Observatory as a coolie. However, he is the person, this is the first recorded discovery in modern science by an Indian. 1867, he discovered variable star R Reticula, and 1872, he became the Fellow of Royal Astronomical Society, the first Indian to be recognized. However, back in India, his situation was not more than a coolie. See the kind of racial discrimination that these people were facing. And an important case study is that of a Pramathanath Bose, is a pioneering geologist and paleontologist. Incidentally, he is the first science graduate from British University, got his degree from Royal School of Mines. And then, while he was in London, of course, he participated in the political activities with Dadabhai Nauroji and Anand Mohan Bose. When he returned, he joined Geological Survey of India. They was first to discover petroleum in Assam, manganese in Jabalpur, coal in Darjeeling, copper in Sikkim. However, in 1903, he took voluntary retirement. The reason was a person called Thomas Holland, who was 10 years junior to him, was made superintendent of GSI. So the Indian, the brown-skinned person, cannot become head of GSI. That was the strategy. However, after 1903, after his voluntary retirement, he joined the services with the Mayurbhanj state. As the young generation may know, that there was British India and also there were princely states. So he joined the princely state at Mayurbhanj, and there he started his exploration. And the interesting part of that was in 1904, he wrote to J.N. Tata, and I brought to you a part of his letter. As you are interested in the development of the iron industry of this country, I have to bring to your notice as exceedingly rich and extensive deposits of iron ore, which I have just explored in this state. The ores consist of magnetite, hematite, and limonite. They occur in such abundance that for all practical purposes, they may be considered to be inexhaustible. And that is what culminated in establishment of Tata Iron and Steel at Sakchi in 1907. Of course, later he started the Bengal Technical Institute, which today we know as the Jadavpur University. Now, in 1920, Acharya Praful Chandra Ray, in his presidential address, showed this table. That is the composition of scientific staff in colonial scientific enterprises in 1920. By the time there were several scientific organizations, Botanical Survey of India, Geological Survey of India, Zoological Survey of India, Agricultural Science, Forest Science, Medical Services, Indian Munition Board, Meteorological Department, Veterinary Department, Education Service, and Indian Trigonometric Surveys, in which the total number of the British officers were 195. This we are talking about 1920, and there were only 18 Indians. However, you can see the average pay. You consider here the Geological Survey of India, the European was getting 970 rupees per month, whereas the Indian would get 700. In case of agricultural services, for the same post, the European would get 1,000 rupees and Indians were getting 460 rupees. And you can see the education service. There was imperial service and the provincial service. All our great scientists, later will introduce them, they were put into the provincial service at a salary of 470 rupees, whereas their British colleagues were getting 910 rupees. So this was that racial discrimination that was happening in the scientific area. And this is what the racial discriminations Indian fought back. How did they do that is an interesting story. Now, there are famous statements which were made by the Britishers. Professor Samant talked about some of them. The Medlicott, who was head of GSI, said, Indians are incapable of any original work in natural sciences. Alfred Croft was the director of public instruction of Bengal. He told Jagdish Chandra Bose that Indians do not possess the requisite temperament for exact sciences. And when Acharya Praful Chandra Ray, he protested over the difference in the salary, which we discussed just now, he was told there are other walks of life open to you. Nobody compelled you to accept this appointment. And on this backdrop, a small section of scientific and political intelligentsia set an agenda to create alternate structure to practice modern science within the framework of nationalism. And this is where the India strikes back the racial discrimination. And there were two visionaries who started this whole story. The first one was Mahendra Lal Sarkar. He was an MD in modern medicine, but he was the first practitioner of homeopathy in India. He started a campaign in 1867 for a National Science Association. And he believed that the scientific pursuit and its resulting technological advances was a key component in harnessing the national awakening. And what is said, this is extremely important. We would endeavor to carry on the work with our own efforts, unaided by the government. I want it to be entirely under our management and control. I want it to be solely native and purely national. And his efforts resulted in foundation of this particular institute, the Indian Association for the Cultivation of Sciences, in 1876. It started with a modest contribution of 61,000 rupees collected through donations of 500,000 rupees from the people of this country. Now, why there is a word Indian Association in the name, and that has got a very interesting background. In the same year, 1876, Surendranath Banerjee and Anand Mohan Bose, they formed an organization called Indian Association, the first nationalist political organization, much before the Indian National Congress came into picture. And this name, Indian Association, was taken in the name of this institute, Indian Association for Cultivation of Science. So the Indian Association for Cultivation of Science became the scientific extension of the political movement. And this is where the paths of science development and paths for the political movement for the India's freedom, they started merging. And this particular idea, the IACS idea, it provided an example for establishment of several science and technical institutes in India, as we'll see later. The second visionary was Ashutosh Mukherjee. He was a mathematician, lawyer, educationist, and as I said, that Calcutta University introduced the science degrees so much later that he had MA in physics in 1886. Of course, he also did Bachelor of Law in 1888 and Doctorate of Law in 1894. He was a judge of Calcutta High Court from 1904 to 1920, and for a short period, he was also the Chief Justice of Calcutta High Court. But the most important aspect was that he was a Vice Chancellor of Calcutta University for 5 terms. That time, each term used to be for 2 years. What he did was amazing. He was the first Indian mathematician to conduct mathematical research. He was also lecturer of mathematics at Indian Association for Cultivation of Sciences. However, is the most important contribution that when he was a Vice Chancellor of Calcutta University, he established Calcutta University College of Science 1904 for the postgraduate studies and research in science. The British government did not want to fund it. However, Ashutosh Mukherjee convinced his lawyer colleagues Taraknath Palit and Rash Bihari Ghosh, and they gave generous donation to start this University College of Science. He was the person responsible for discovering talents of C.V. Raman, Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, Bhandarkar, S.P. Agharkar, D.D. Kosambi, S. Ramanujam. He brought, except Ramanujam, he brought all others to Calcutta universities. D.D. Kosambi was made professor of Pali, C.V. Raman was made professor of physics, S. Radhakrishnan was a professor of philosophy. He was the person responsible for identifying the talents in these people. And Robert Anderson, he writes about him, no greater friend to young scientists could have been in the Vice Chancellor's office than Mukherjee, and this continued even when he left that office to become the Justice of Calcutta High Court in 1920 until his death in 1924. Now you can see the science was brought in as an extension of the freedom struggle. And that brought a very different character to the Indian science. As we know, making scientific discoveries require a certain amount of defiance. That defiance means you can challenge even the greatest of the brains. You can challenge Einstein, you can challenge Boyle, anyone. And that defiance is needed in a scientist. And that suppressed anger against the British masters provided that defiance to our scientists. And therefore, that began the golden period of Indian science. This golden period of Indian science starts with 2 acharyas. The first acharya is Acharya Jagadish Chandra Bose, a physicist, botanist, and is also known as the father of radio science. And he did his BSc from University College of London, still foreign return scientist, DSc from the University College of London, and then he joined the Presidency College in 1895. Well, there are two sets of discoveries which have made him immortal. Between 1894 to 1902, a discovery of microwave up to 5 mm wavelength and verification of their optical properties. The first demonstration of electromagnetic waves by ringing a bell remotely across a wall. This experiment was done right in Calcutta. And development of a detector, the iron mercury ion detector, with as a telephone detector. And from 1902 to 1937, he studied the electrographic response of living and non-living matter. And this is what we all know, that he also proved that the plants have feelings and they respond to external stimuli. He developed the cresograph to measure the plant response. However, there is one important issue that we need to note. J.C. Bose was reluctant to patent his inventions in microwave. Bhagini Nivedita later on tried to do it, but J.C. Bose was too adamant. Marconi, who was at least 1 year late in his discovery, patented his findings and developed a telephonic link across Atlantic in 1901. However, IEEE recognized him as one of the founding fathers of the radio RF and FM engineering. His original work is also used in the National Radio Astronomy Laboratory in Arizona. And Neville Mott, the Nobel laureate of 1977, he made an interesting statement that J.C. Bose was at least 60 years ahead of his time. And that is what the detector, what he produced. The Bose anticipated the existence and use of PN type of semiconductors. J.C. Bose gave a new identity to Indian science. Advancing science also meant achieving a new status, not only for the self, but for the national prestige. There's another important thing which he contributed. He revived the experimental tradition of ancient Indian scholarship. And what he writes to Tagore in 1901, and I quote, "I am alive with the life force of the Mother Earth. I have prospered with the help of the love of my countrymen. For ages, the sacrificial fire of India's enlightenment has been kept burning. Millions of Indians have protected it with their lives, a small spark of which has reached this country through my research." And in 1917, he established the Bose Institute. Other Acharya was Acharya Praful Chandra Ray. He is the father of modern Indian chemistry, and he was a scientist, educationist, humanist, rationalist, and patriot, all par excellence. Again, he had his education in England from the University of Edinburgh, got his DSc in 1887, and he was professor at Presidency College and Calcutta University. He is known for many things. However, I have just condensed it into the 4 bullets. The first one was the chemical discoveries, the original investigation by right of which he took his recognized place among chemists. The work on Hindu chemistry, which made known to the world the science of ancient India. The establishment of Bengal Chemicals and Pharmaceutical Work as a successful industrial enterprise. And he had a direct participation in the social and political activities, which he calls as the life outside the test tube. His vision, this vision is extremely important at that particular time, when everyone was talking only about the education. Acharya Praful Chandra Ray said, "The progress of India and Indians can only be possible through education and economic prosperity of masses, and for later commerce and industry are essential, and that chemistry can play a major role in countries' industrial and economic progress. With that view, he founded the Bengal Chemicals and Pharmaceutical Works in 1892. He was the first academic entrepreneur of this country, and his example was followed by few others in the country at that time, as we shall see later. He was also associated with several commercial ventures like Bengal Potteries, Bengal Enamel, National Tanneries, Weighing Machine Manufacturing Company, the Sindhia Shipping Company, publishing houses, and so on and so forth. His work and life outside the test tube, well, he got introduced to Gopal Krishna Gokhale and Mahatma Gandhi in 1901, and 1921 onwards, he traveled all over the country spreading the message of Khadi and national education. He had the bent of an industrialist. However, when he was asked, "Why are you promoting charkha?" his answer was simple: charkha was poor man's insurance against famine. During 1921 to 26, traveled throughout the country to promote Khadi, national education, and removing untouchability. He had active participation in the freedom struggle, and he organized relief operations, the Khulna famine in 1921 and the North Bengal floods in 1922. I'll just bring it to you what Mahatma Gandhi said about Acharya Prafulchandra Ray. And this Mahatma Gandhi writes in 1931 of the meeting which he had with Acharya Prafulchandra Ray in 1901. And I quote, "I had the privilege of knowing Sir P.C. Ray for the first time when Gokhale was his next door neighbor in 1901, and I was undergoing tutelage under the latter." All of you know that Gandhi was trying to understand the Indian politics under Gokhale. It was difficult to believe that the man in simple Indian dress and wearing simple manners could possibly be the great scientist and professor he even then was. And it took my breath away when I heard that out of his princely salary, he kept only a few rupees for himself, and rest he devoted to public uses and particularly for helping poor students. In 1919, there was a protest against the Rowlatt Act. The Rowlatt Act was a draconian act which gave much power to the British government to suppress any agitation. And the Jallianwala Bagh incidents was a fallout of the Rowlatt Act. And there was a protest organized by Chittaranjan Das in Calcutta, and he asked P.C. Ray to speak. And what is the newspaper report was like this: he was a man of laboratory, but he felt that these are the occasions which demanded that he should leave his test tube to attend the call of the country. And in that meeting, he gave that call: science can afford to wait, but Swaraj cannot. Look at this man, is ready to sacrifice all his science, what he was doing, for the cause of the independence of this country. And friends, you know that India has got a rich tradition of chemistry and metallurgy, starting from the Indus Valley to all these pictures that we see of. However, the first person who read the manuscripts, Sanskrit manuscripts, and wrote the history of Indian chemistry was Acharya Prafulchandra Ray. And his book, The History of Hindu Chemistry, the volume 1 was published in 1902 and volume 2 was published in 1907. It's a monumental work on the glorious achievement of the ancient Indians in the field of chemistry and medical sciences. And several of his contemporaries like Berthelot or Arrhenius or Van Lippmann, they appreciated this work and wrote commentaries on that. These two acharyas, they mentored a large number of students, and the era of homegrown scientists begins now in the country. And first and foremost amongst them is C.V. Raman, is the first Indian and also the first Asian to receive Nobel Prize in Science. You can see here is a BA, MA. The degree in sciences had not started by the time. From the Presidency College, Madras. Initially joined the Indian Finance Services in Calcutta, became the Accounts General in 1911, and he used the IACS laboratories for his research work while being in the finance services of the British government. And he joined Calcutta University. This is Dr. Mukherjee. He invited him as Palit professor in 1917. And when he accepted this position, his salary went down from 1100 to 600 per month. But that did not matter to him. In 1928, discovered the Raman effect, and 1930 got a Nobel Prize in physics. And there are other interesting researches which he did, which are not often talked about. The one of them is Raman-Nath effect, then the physics of Indian musical instruments, and spectroscopy of crystals. C.V. Raman provided that aggressiveness to the Indian science. He himself was aggressive in the positive sense. And what his message to the Indian students was, and I'll read it out to you. I can assert without fear of contradiction that the quality of Indian mind is equal to any tectonic, Nordic, or Anglo-Saxon mind. What we lack is perhaps courage. What we lack perhaps is the driving force which takes one anywhere. We have, I think, developed an inferiority complex. I think what is needed in India today is the destruction of that deadliest spirit. We need a spirit of victory, a spirit that would carry us to the rightful place under the sun, a spirit which will recognize that we, as inheritors of a proud civilization, are entitled to a rightful place on this planet. If that indomitable spirit were to arise, nothing can hold us from achieving our destiny. And this message, this is valid even today, and we need to take it to our students. Another homegrown scientist of that era was the Satyendranath Bose. He's a physicist who revolutionized the quantum physics. Got his BSc, MSc from the Presidency College, and you can see that time the Calcutta University had introduced BSc, and MSc was in 1914. And he joined as a reader in Dhaka University. 1924, his paper Planck's Law and the Light Quantum Hypothesis, which was published in Phys, laid the newer foundations of quantum mechanics. And the history of science considers him as the third giant of the old quantum physics era after Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr. And in physics today, you can find several words which are derived from Satyendranath Bose. He is immortalized by many words like bosons, the Bose statistics, Bose stimulation, Bose-Einstein condensation, Bose-nova. There are lots of interesting stories about Satyendranath Bose, but I will not go into them. The one such thing was the Bose-Einstein later, when Bose derived the Planck's law from non-classical arguments. He wrote a letter to Einstein that, look, this is what I have done. If you feel it correct, then can I request you to translate this paper in German and get it published in Zeit for Phys. And this letter is dated 4th June 1924, and Einstein promptly replied. And Einstein's letter is 2nd July 1924. And that's how Bose came into the prominence after Einstein translated his paper in German and got it published in Zeit Physics. And based on his paper, Einstein also predicted a new phase, new state of matter. That's the Bose-Einstein condensation. He essentially used the ideas from Bose's paper, and this came in 1925. And it took scientists 70 years to realize this state in a laboratory. And it was done in 1995, where the Bose-Einstein condensation was produced in the laboratory by Wyman, Cornell, Ketterle, and Schullett. Another great of that time was Meghnad Saha. He's a physicist and mathematician, and he was professor at Allahabad University and Calcutta University. And he's famous for his thermal ionization equation, the Saha equation, and how gloriously people talk about his contribution. This is Sven Rosenland in his book Theoretical Astrophysics. And I read it out for you. Although Bohr must thus be considered the pioneer in the field of atomic theory, it was the Indian physicist Meghnad Saha who, in 1920, first attempted to develop a consistent theory of the spectral sequence of the stars from the point of view of atomic theory. The impetus given to astrophysics by Saha's work can scarcely be overestimated, as nearly all later progress in this field has been influenced by it, and much of the subsequent work has the character of refinements of Saha's ideas. This is such a pioneering work that he carried out. He is one scientist who was closely involved in the revolutionary movement. And I would like to spend little time on this. It's a very interesting issue. In the students' days, he came in contact with the Subhash Chandra Bose, Sailen Ghosh, Jatindra Mukherjee, Pulin Das. And he was a member of a samiti called Anushilan Samiti, which had a close contacts with the Gadar movement in US and Germany. Now, this particular issue requires little discussion. The first thing is, important thing is that while the Indian National Congress was campaigning for the peaceful satyagrahas, there was a band of youngsters who thought that we should do it through the revolutionary approach. Why did they think so? Around that time, Ireland was also under British rule, and the Irish were also fighting for their own freedom. In Ireland, there was an Irish National Party, which was also trying to get the freedom through the peaceful means like the Indian National Congress. However, in Ireland, there was a revolutionary party, Irish Revolutionary Party, Sinn Féin. And this Sinn Féin was helped by Germans to set up several underground organizations and all that. And this is the model that the Indians wanted to adopt. And that is also was the origin of the Gadar movement, the Anushilan Samiti. In fact, there was one incident where the Gadar people, they organized some ammunition and they sent a message to Anushilan Samiti that from Germany, there is a ship going to come to Singapore, and then it will come to this on the Calcutta coast, and this will be loaded with ammunition. And it was Meghnad Saha and one of his friends were given responsibility to collect that ammunition. So Meghnad Saha and his friend, they went. The place was in Sundarban. However, the British already came to know about it, and when the ship halted at Shanghai, they confiscated all that ammunition, and the ship never reached Sundarban. He was also involved in that Rowlatt Act protest, and we know that Rowlatt Act gave rise to the Jallianwala Bagh incidents, and on that you see what a young revolutionary Dr. Meghnad Saha writes. These incidences have rendered the prospect of a peaceful betterment of condition of living for a common man in the country an extremely remote one. And in 1938, these years are now important. The India was approaching the freedom, and therefore there was a need for a nation's reconstruction. And therefore, in 1938, when Subhash Chandra Bose became the president of Indian National Congress, he persuaded him to create the National Planning Committee to scientifically plan nation's reconstruction. This seed, which was in Calcutta, this science education and research in no time spread across India. And I'll give you quickly a few examples of that. Well, we all know about Srinivas Ramanujam, developed his research in isolation and compiled 3,900 results. A small page of his diary, I have brought it to here for demonstration. And his mentor, G.H. Hardy, said, I have never met this equal, and I can compare him only with Euler and Jacobi. With his memory, his patience, and his power of calculation, he combined a power of generalization, a feeling for form, a capacity for rapid modification of his hypotheses that were often really startling, and made him in his own peculiar field without a rival in his days. The Ramanujam, he revived the rich heritage of Indian mathematics, and his work inspired generations of mathematicians. I was very happy when Professor Samant talked about Ruchiram Sahni. As a scientist, innovator in an entirely different province that was in Punjab, educationist and a science promoter, he was the first scientific officer, Indian officer in Indian Meteorological Department. He served there only for 2 years, 1885 to 1887, and then he became the first science professor of the Government College, Lahore, in 1887 till 1918. When he was appointed as the officer in the Indian Met Department, his job was to collect all the weather reports, collate them, and publish them. When his appointment took place, see what was the piece that appeared in the Pioneer, the newspaper from Allahabad. This was in 1885. The time has not come for a native to be appointed for a scientific post. Daily weather reports had been sent to other countries, including Russia, who would have little regard for Government of India were they to realize that someone brown skinned had been appointed for a post of this significance. This was that racial bias. In 1885, he predicted the False Point cyclone, which happened on September 22nd, 1885, which was a Category 5 cyclone on the Bay of Bengal. And because of the predictions, a large number of lives were saved. However, Alexander Pedler wrote a detailed research paper on this particular finding, and Sahani's name did not find mention in it. In 1887, he visited Calcutta, and his visit to Indian Association of Cultivation of Sciences he drew inspiration and established the Punjab Science Institute at Lahore. And the aim of this institute was manufacturing laboratory equipments. See, in 1887, this man thinks that the science cannot be taken to the masses, to the schools, unless we manufacture the laboratory equipments and demonstrate those experiments to the students. And that is what he does in 1887. And in 1914, he established the sulfuric acid factory, again taking clue from P.C. Ray. However, as it would happen to an Indian professor, he was superseded by a junior for the post of head of chemistry department, Government College, Lahore. However, he did not resign. He took sabbatical and he went for his PhD work at Rutherford's Manchester laboratory, published very interesting papers. He was the man at that time who said that the employment-oriented technical education combined with entrepreneurial skills is the way forward for India. And you can see how the visionary these people were. And today he is better known as a mentor for S.S. Bhatnagar and father of Birbal Sahani. On the institutions, You can see here in 1890, the Maharaja Sayajivarao Gaikwad started Kala Bhavan. This was the largest technical school. It was a school for craft and industrial art. Today it is known as MS University, Baroda. In 1909, Indian Institute of Science was founded by Jamshedji Tata and the princely state of Mysore. In 1916, the Central Hindu College started by Pandit Madan Mohan Malaviya and the Maharajas of Banaras and Darbhanga. See, the princely states, they indeed came forward to promote Indian science. This was later named as the Banaras Hindu University. And there is one name which we should remember. He is P.C. Ray of the West, Tribhuvan Das Kalyan Das Gurjar. He got his BSc from in chemistry and MA from Bombay University. And in 1890, he started his career with the Kala Bhavan, the same institute which came up in Baroda. He worked there for a few years, and in 1896, he joined Wilson College, Mumbai, as professor of chemistry. And in 1896, there was plague in Mumbai, and he developed a medicine for plague. And in 1903, he started a small chemical factory near Paris. And then, on the invitation of Maharaja of Baroda, he started Alembic Chemical Works at Baroda under the patronage of Maharaja of Baroda. And he had his student, Professor Koti Bhaskar, with him, and a businessman, Mr. B.D. Amin. And that is why this combination, scientists and the commercial people, that Alembic Chemical Works still stands today. No, this talk would be incomplete if you don't remember M. Vishweshwaraya. Is a renowned civil engineer, again a homegrown scientist, that graduated from College of Engineering, Pune, 1883. He was a civil engineer in Bombay Presidency, took voluntary retirement in 1908. He was then consulting chief engineer for the Hyderabad Nizam, and then he became Diwan of Mysore State. Now, there are too many things which are recorded against his name. He was an inventor of the automatic wear water floodgate system, which was first time used in Padakvasla and then used in most of the dams. He was the person behind the Krishna Sagar Dam and Mukamba Bridge on Gaya. He was the chief engineer. He designed the flood protection system for Hyderabad. The protection system for the Visakhapatnam port is credited to him. He also visited Aden and worked on the water supply and drainage system. He started the Mysore soap factory, the Mysore iron and steel works, and also contributed to the growth of education like the University College of Engineering, Bangalore University, and the Agricultural University of Bangalore. He had a vision. It was a very special vision. And I bring his own words. And what he says, without modern industries to produce commodities, without modern machinery and tools to increase production, without engines for transport and munition for defense, the country will remain crippled and stationary while other countries will be forging ahead. And he had an audacity to argue this particular position with Mahatma Gandhi in 1934. And after that debate, he writes, "We hold perhaps diametrically opposite views on which path would deliver the country to its destiny. I would never persuade myself to take up a hostile attitude towards one with your brilliant achievement. Alongside the village and cottage industries, India needs steel plants and factories to transfer its wealth and rise in the 20th century." The message he gave was the industrialize or perish. And that's how this was happening in 1934. He was setting up an agenda for independent India. And then Shankar Purushottam Agharkar, great botanist, he's again from University, Bombay University. He was a lecturer at Elphinstone College, worked for a short while at Indian Museum, Calcutta in 1933, and he was picked up by Ashutosh Mukherjee on the advice of C.V. Raman for Ghosh Professor of Botany at Calcutta University in 1913. This should be 13 here. And then he was sent to Germany for doing his PhD, and he's the one who founded Maharashtra Association for Cultivation of Sciences. This is that building, and this is now known as the Agarkar Institute. We also take little time to remember those forgotten scientists. One of them was Shankar Abaji Bhise. He was an innovator. He's the first Edison of this country. He had 200 inventions, and 40 patents. And again, I have listed only few here: the indoor coal gas generator, station indicator for railways, grocery weighing machine, 1890. This was a competition organized at all British Empire level, and he proposed a design which was accepted, and then he went to Britain in 1890. This is his another invention is a typecasting machine that revolutionized the printing industry called the Bisotype. When he went to England, he worked with Dadabhai Naoroji, and while doing his inventions, he also joined Dadabhai Naoroji in demonstrations and meetings. But you must remember that the British government had no support for such inventions or innovations. They wanted everything to be manufactured in Britain and then exported to India. India was only taken as a big market. And therefore, the Bhise did not receive any support. And therefore, in 1920, he left India, went to United States. And in United States, he championed Gandhi's ideas and hosted the Indian nationalist in the United States. There were also Khadi crusaders. And you see, when this process was happening, the political movement was happening, there were many students who had to discontinue their education. And we need to remember some of them. And the representative of them is Subbarao. He was a student of Madras Medical College. However, he was denied MBBS degree because he used to wear khadi surgical dress, and the khadi was detested by his professor. So there he had nowhere to go, no degree from India. Of course, he cannot go to Britain, and therefore he went to United States, obtained his degree from Harvard, and he discovered the function of adenosine triphosphate and also discovered the first cancer chemotherapy agent, methotrexate, in 1940. And there is this lady, Anamani, born in 1918. And you see, in 1925, there was Vaikon Satyagraha, where Mahatma Gandhi visited. And this girl was just 7 years old. And this girl started wearing khadi from the age of 7 as a symbol of her nationalistic spirit. And she became later a distinguished meteorologist and physicist, and her work was in the meteorological instrument, measurement of solar radiation, wind power, and ozone. And finally, we should also remember Prahlad Chunilal Vaidya is a physicist and mathematician known for his pioneering work in general theory of relativity. And in general theory of relativity, there is a concept called Vaidya metric, and that is the same Vaidya, the Prahlad Chunilal Vaidya. He, in 1941, he left his job and worked for Gandhi-inspired voluntary organization called Ahimsak Vyayam Sangh. And the object of this Ahimsak Vyayam Sangh was to train satyagrahis for Quit India movement. So he's a physicist, and also he was a freedom fighter. Now I come to the last part of this presentation. What lessons do we learn, and how these lessons are important in today's time? And this is lessons from the science and scientists of the pre-independence India. The first important thing is the zeal for modern science was spread all over India. I have shown you the examples. It covered all sections of people and all regions of the country. The original contribution to science was an answer to the colonial racial experience. And some of the statements which I brought to you in the course of this talk, once the English knowledge was imparted to the Asiatics, their faculty of reasoning would be restored and they would rise to the scale of human being by the Charles Grant. Or the Medlicott's statement, Indians are incapable of any original work in natural sciences. Or Alfred Kraft's statement, Indians do not possess the requisite temperament for exact sciences. And therefore, these original contributions that our scientists did, it was an answer to this colonial experience. At the same time, the science, the achievements in science contributed to the national pride. And the scientists also joined the political movements from independence, and they also had an eye on the national reconstruction after independence was achieved. There's another important thing that we need to also note. The scientists practiced modern science as a continuity of ancient India's intellectual pursuits. They never thought that the modern science is an implanted science in India. They thought it as a continuity of our intellectual pursuits of the centuries together. And in between, for a short few centuries, there was a dark period in the medieval time. There was a discontinuity, and this scientist took the modern science as the continuity of our ancient efforts. And there are some examples which I can take from the works of this scientist. Srinivasa Ramanujam, he represented the rich and diverse heritage of Indian mathematics. And he was in the line of the greats such as Aryabhata, Varahamihira, Brahmagupta, Bhaskara, and Madhava. Jagdish Chandra Bose, he believed that his work on non-distinction between living and non-living asserted a sense of unity and strength, a grand cosmic unity of the Indian thought. So finally, he thought that the plants and the animals and the human beings and the non-animals being all the same, this is the cosmic unity which is of the Indian thought. Acharya Praful Chandra Ray's work on the history of Hindu chemistry established that unparalleled development of chemistry and metallurgy in ancient India. And in fact, his work on the mercurous compound was inspired from the ancient Indian chemistry of mercury, the Rasakarpura. And C.V. Raman was curious about the remarkable appreciation of the acoustic principles prevalent in ancient India, and therefore he worked to find the physics behind these Indian musical instruments. So they took it as a continuity of the ancient Indian traditions and knowledge. At the same time, we must remember that the Indian generosity helped the growth of science in this country. Many places we forget this, that the British government established this, established that, established that. How did they establish? Well, let me give you very few examples. Well, we know that ISCS was started with the 61,000 rupees collected through small donations. Another example which I talked about is the Calcutta University Science College. Well, Taraknath Palit contributed 27.66 lakhs in 2 installments and a plot of land and the residential building. And Rash Bihari Ghosh contributed 10.46 lakhs. If you look at the medical education in Mumbai and Pune region, that started with the donation from Jijibai, the David Sassoon, and Bairamji Jijubai, the BJ Medical School, JJ Hospital. This is all from the donations from the Indians. J.N. Tata's contribution of rupees 30 lakhs and the donation of 5 lakhs by Mysore state along with 300 acres of land led to the establishment of Indian Institute of Science in 1910. The Indian generosity was not only for starting these institutions, but many affluent people, they contributed for the scholarships for the Indian students. For example, Premchand Raichand, all of us remember the Rajabai Tower. He offered 5 scholarships to Calcutta University. Dadabhai Nauroji collected 175,000 rupees for Canning Fellowship at Bombay University. So this was the Indian generosity that was responsible for bringing up this, and we should not forget this. In this context, I must also add here that if you look at 2019 RBI figure, how much money Indians sent abroad for educating their children, that amount is $18.7 billion. So Indians have money. They don't want to use it today. In India, if $18.7 billion are available to the higher education system in this country, I think we would be the number 1 country in research and innovation. But we don't do that. Somehow this Indian generosity needs to be revived. All these scientists were teachers first. They were great teachers. They cared for their students. And therefore, they could strongly influence the younger generation to participate in this endeavor. Today, we are missing this particular link. All our scientists are not teachers. And I must bring it to your notice the great thoughts these people had about their students. And I'll bring here something of the later year, but the spirit in C.V. Raman was the same throughout and with the other scientists. And this episode is about the Bharat Ratna Award to Raman in 1955. So he writes to President of India, and the context will be known to you. My dear Dr. Rajendra Prasad, I was greatly touched by your very kind telegram received last night, inviting me to be your guest at Rashtrapati Bhavan for the ceremony on the 27th January 1955. So now you know the context in which Rajendra Prasad had invited him to Rashtrapati Bhavan to accept this award. The next lines, I find myself unable to come to Delhi for the function. Even ordinarily, my work here is all engrossing and prevents me from accepting assignments which call me away from Bangalore. At the present time, I am firmly tied down here to enable one of my students to complete his doctoral thesis, which the regulations require him to submit to his university before the end of January. Thus, my duty as a teacher has to take precedence over my own personal affairs. I feel fully confident that you will appreciate the compelling nature of the circumstances which prevent me from accepting your kind and gracious invitation to come to Delhi. C.V. Raman. See, for a PhD thesis of a student, he does not go to Rashtrapati Bhavan to receive that award. And today, we have people for a very small award, they will leave everything and rush for this award. This is that student-teacher relationship that these people had. And we need to revive this tradition. This scientist had a clear objective for science. The science was not for the careers or self-grandizing. As Satyendranath Bose said, we wanted to put scientific knowledge to use through technology for the benefit of people or to contribute to science by intensive study. For P.C. Ray, science was for industrial development and wealth creation. For Meghnad Saha, science was an instrument of social change. application of engineering to the problems of reconstruction of independent India was central to M. Visvesvaraya. And finally, in the freedom struggle, there were ideological conflicts, and the scientists, they clarified the ideology. The Swadeshi movement was divided into two on ideological level. There was a group, that group wanted to go with everything traditional, whereas there was another group that wanted to adopt to modern science and technology. And this is where our scientists chipped in. And these scientists cleared this confusion and supported the industrialization on modern lines. And that is what we saw from Meghnad Saha, P.C. Ray to all these people. And this particular clearing of this ideology, it provided the platform for nation development for the next generation of scientists that we have here. So this is the story of India's scientific science as a part of the freedom movement. And I will have some concluding remarks. And those concluding remarks, I would like to tell my young friends, what is patriotism in a free and democratic country? Well, when India was not independent, carrying a tiranga on the shoulder was a sign of patriotism. Because if the British police, they find a tiranga on your shoulder, you could be beaten up or you could be jailed. In the free and democratic country, this passive patriotism is what is not required. What is required is doing your duty to the best of your capabilities. That's the first principle. If you are a student, do your best. You are going to be the potential contributor to the growth of the country in few years. You are going to be the engine of economic growth of this country. So do your best. If you are a teacher, do your best to mentor this generation so that they contribute to the national wealth. If you are a scientist, then you do your duty for the betterment of the lives of the people. If you're a taxpayer, pay your taxes. Doing your duty to the best of your capabilities is patriotism, one part of the patriotism. Following traffic rules is also patriotism. If you are not following, then you are not patriotic. And the second important thing is responding to the call of the nation. The nation gives several calls. And I'm very sorry to say that during the corona pandemic, there was a call that used masks. We did not do it. Today, there is a call for Atmanirbhar Bharat. Can we say today, like P.C. Ray said, well, science can wait, independence cannot, Swaraj cannot. Can we say that our papers can wait, our research can wait, but Atmanirbhar Bharat cannot wait? This is what is called as responding to the call of the nation. And my young friends and the teachers, this is what, to my mind, is patriotism that we need to practice in this free and democratic country. With these words, I close this presentation. Thank you very much.
As always, Professor B.N. Jagtap has almost mesmerized the audience in front of him by his intellectual brilliance. This was the thing which one would hope would never finish. सभी को लग रहा था कि ये जो संभाषण है जगताप सर हमारे बीच का वो ख़त्म ही न हो, मगर उन्होंने ऐसे जगह हम सबको खड़ा कर दिया है कि हम सबको विचार करने की बहुत ज़रूरत होगी. मैं इसके आगे हमारे संस्था के कोकण प्रांत विज्ञान भारती की वाइस प्रेसिडेंट डॉक्टर जयश्री फडणीस मैडम को विनती करूंगा कि इस सेशन का इस
Thank you, sir, for this wonderful talk. It's difficult to come out of it. We were all so engrossed in this, your lucid narrative, taking us back to the pre-independence era, unfolding the challenges faced by our scientists in various terms, in terms of the challenges, discrimination, the hurdles that were raised, and the spirit of the scientist under which they worked for the benefit of the nation. Every scientist was so well portrayed, every slide was so content-rich, and at the same time, the messages, the letters, the quotes of these scientists, these were very touching, giving us all a lot of points to take home as to how we could inculcate such practices and recall their contribution towards freedom struggle. Besides the scientific accomplishments, their contribution towards the nation's freedom were very well highlighted. So really, the title that remembering our scientist is on this occasion as we celebrate this Swatantrata Ka Amrut Mahotsav. It reflects so well. It's the galaxy of scientists that you brought forth makes every Indian feel very proud about it. Truly, these are us unsung brilliant heroes, our intellectual warriors who fought the freedom struggle and laid the foundation of our country. So thanks to you. Words are insufficient to express this, but it was a very, very wonderful presentation.
Okay.
As a part of my responsibility given to me, I should propose a vote of thanks to express my gratitude to all those who made this program a great success. As I said to begin with, I'm very thankful to you, sir, for this wonderful presentation. The concluding remarks are to be remembered by each of us. It is that which will make our nation strong and we can progress. The various slides that you presented about each scientist, I think we could have such type of small exhibits in our laboratories. That is a way of teaching or bringing forth, to the younger generation, these ancient heroes, which made it possible for our country to gain independence. Thank you so much, sir. Well, I thank Vivekananda Education Society and all its members of the managing committee to support this initiative of ours to hold this inaugural function of Swatantrata Ka Amrut Mahotsav. The title selected by Sir, remembering our scientists and their contribution towards freedom struggle, itself speaks about the objectives of Vibha, where the entire year we expect to have such type of celebrations and bring this galaxy of scientists in front of our current generation, where they feel proud about our nation. That is the spirit, that is how the patriotic spirit will be inculcated in these students. I'm very thankful to Asrani sir. Your address, as usual, sir, it's very motivating, and your support is the strength of Vibha. That is very, very essential. We can reach out to a large number of students as well as faculty members through your esteemed institutions under the umbrella of Vivekanand Education Society. Thank you so much, sir, for this support. I would like to thank all the heads of institutions, the managing trustees, our trustees of the managing committee, Vivekanand Education Society, for your support, for joining us in this initiative, because it's not just beginning or an inaugural function, but we can have a longer term relationship to have a variety of programs which will really fulfill the objectives of the Swatantrata Ka Amrut Mahotsav celebration in a very befitting manner. I would like to thank Dr. Anita Kavar, the principal of VS College of Arts, Science and Commerce, along with her dedicated team, for all the support extended, for coordinating between all the institutions and making this program a big success. I understand the pressures of admission and all that is there for principals, but yet she did all her best, and I'm really very thankful for her wholehearted support. I would like to thank the audience. Without them, this entire program would have not reached its objective. I'm sure each one of you would be inspired to participate in this Mahotsav, the Amrut Mahotsav that we are talking about, and make it a grand success. Thank you so much for this support. I would like to thank Mr. Suman Gangar and Ms. Riddhi Bharani for their creative idea of having this curtain raiser on a virtual stage. Well, this was something which was very encouraging, brought a good sparkle for the whole program. Also, your brochure depicting the very objective of holding this program. Thank you so much for your creative work. I thank Manisha O for rendering the Vibha Prarthana, which is a collection of shlokas. In fact, it is the driving force for every Vibha Karyakarta to work selflessly, to work for the nation, for spreading science and popularizing science. And I believe, yes, it is the science and technology that will take the nation to great heights. I would like to thank More sir for presenting the VS Geet. In fact, it is an brand identity of Vivekanand Education Society. So well is it structured, communicating the message behind this. Also, I would like to thank the Margadarshan Samiti as well as the governing council of Vidnyan Bharati Konkan Prant for their continuous support, ideas for structuring this program, without which such long-term programs, it's not just one program, it would not be a success without their constant support, guidance, and motivation. Especially, I would like to thank Dr. Rajwade. He is the secretary of Vidnyan Bharati Konkan Prant, as well as Professor Srinivas Samant, who is the president. His talk was very well highlighting the objectives of celebrating the Swatantrata Ka Amrut Mahotsav. I thank them wholeheartedly for their continuous guidance and motivation, due to which we are able to conduct so many programs. The most important now, coming to the IT support, I would like to thank Shashank Joshi for his efforts to provide us a stable link and manage very nicely the conduct of this program. Thank you, Shashank, so much, especially for online programs. Without this support, it is almost impossible to have this program done in a proper manner. I would like to thank one and all once again. If I've missed out someone, please excuse me, but I would express it from the bottom of my heart. A big thank you to all who made this program a big success. To conclude, well, it is rather going to be a beginning of a series of programs, but well, this program as it comes, the inaugural function as it comes to an end, let's hope that we meet frequently on many other platforms to enthuse our students, to enrich them with such ideas of our scientists and motivate them to do science in the true sense. Thank you, one and all. We conclude with the national anthem, and I request More sir to please present the national anthem. Thank you.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल गंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्छल जलधि तरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तब जगन्नाथ जनगण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय